Hey, my name's Eric, and today we're going to talk a little about the straw man fallacy. So, what is that? Well, a straw man fallacy is an informal fallacy based on misrepresentation of an opponent's position. To attack a straw man is to create the illusion of having refuted a proposition by substituting a superficially similar yet weaker proposition and refuting it without ever having actually refuted the original position. Well, what does that actually mean? In other words, a straw man is basically taking someone's argument and misrepresenting it in some way, and then knocking down the argument that you created and pretending like that's you winning the argument. So here's Alice, who has a really good argument, represented here by the boxer, and Bob, who's kind of worried about this argument, kind of doesn't think he's going to be able to win it. So instead of actually arguing against Alice's argument, Bob goes ahead and creates a straw man, which is to say he makes up some new argument that's kind of similar to Alice's argument, but different fundamentally. So here's the straw figure he's created. Now, Bob doesn't have near as much problem knocking down this argument, so he goes ahead and picks apart this argument. There you go, you see him knocking him out. And now Bob kind of thinks he's won the argument. Look how happy he is. Yay, Bob, he beat Alice's argument. But in actuality, Bob never even argued against Alice's original argument. He created this new argument and just simply beat that one down and considered that a win. So now I'm going to have a couple examples that we can go and see how this might work in real life. The first example is, here we have Bill. Bill believes Darwin's theory of evolution asserts that human beings develop after a long process of change from pre-hominoid ancestors who are also the source for our primate relatives, chimpanzees, gorillas, etc. If Darwin's theory is correct, then we can no longer assert with such arrogance that we are above the animals. Rather, human beings and human intelligence are simply different, but related results of the same evolutionary process that has produced the rest of the animal kingdom. Well, that sounds like a pretty good argument. Let's see what Bill's friend John has to say about it. So John replies to Bill's well-thought-out argument by saying that Bill is espousing the ridiculous claim that human beings are descended from baboons and are first cousins of orangutans and chimpanzees. But this, and Darwin, is clearly nonsense. So clearly, God's word reveals the truth of human origins. We are created in the image of God. As you can see, John never actually says anything about Bill's original argument. He makes this straw man of Bill talking about claims that human beings are descended from baboons and rewording it in a way that sounds ridiculous so that he can go ahead and tear down that argument instead of actually addressing the specific points of Bill's original argument. My final example has to do with an argument that refutes marijuana legalization. A common example of a straw man fallacy occurs when discussing marijuana. In this example, a speaker would be emphasizing the use of marijuana to solve medical and psychiatric problems, perhaps advocating for more relaxed laws concerning marijuana. To refute this position, an opponent might say that legalizing drugs would lead to widespread drug addiction and death by overdose. The straw man is used to counter the initial point by using a more general and widespread view. We can see they use the word drugs in the refutation, whereas in the original argument we're talking about marijuana, a specific type of drug that might not apply to the arguments used for all drugs. This is a great example of a straw man being used to shift the focus away from what the original argument was about and make it look like you might have won an argument that you really didn't. Now, keep in mind, not every argument is a straw man argument. As you can see in this clip, sometimes an argument isn't a straw man and we jump to conclusions and like to jump out and yell straw man every time that we see something on the news that we don't agree with. It's important to keep in mind that every argument isn't a straw man, and in fact, sometimes calling out a straw man can be a straw man in itself. It's kind of ironic, but just because you find a straw man in someone else's argument doesn't mean that you necessarily won the argument, or that you can just argue against the fact that your opponent is using a straw man argument. That itself is a straw man argument. It's kind of interesting to think about. So in conclusion, just keep in mind that every argument needs to be carefully dissected. And straw men are often mixed into arguments that we see every day that we don't think about. Just make sure next time you're arguing that you're paying attention to whether or not your opponent's arguing against you or against something he's made up, and vice versa. If you keep that in mind, you'll find that you have much more productive arguments. Here's a list of some of the sources I used in this document. You can follow any of the links on here to the websites I got them from. Thanks.